and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and this is my weekly reading vlog. This mug is from my stocking at Christmas. My sister picked it up somewhere for me and it is Her Ladyship and it's Highclere Castle, aka Downton Abbey. Welcome to my week in reading. I traveled an interesting journey through history, as you will discover. Last week I was in the 1700s for quite a bit. We fast forwarded a couple hundred years and landed in the mid 20th century, and there was a lot of turmoil going on in the world at that time, as we all know. So it was very interesting reading very differing points of view on subjects about that time in history, but still a lot of connecting threads as well. So anyway, let's get started with what I read this week. Hello, it is Sunday evening and I'm going to kick off this weekly reading vlog with a book that I just finished, Only the Beautiful. I actually talked a bit about this in my previous weekly reading vlog, which I will link to here, so you can go and watch that if you missed it with my other thoughts about Only the Beautiful, but I was able to finish it today. We have yet another snowstorm outside today, and so normally on a Sunday night we have choir practice and small groups, but all of that was canceled tonight, and so we are just at home, the relaxing evening, and so I finished my book. Now, let me just briefly tell you the story, and also I want to tell you a little bit about the structure of the story because I found it unique and I enjoyed it. And to me, it didn't detract from the story at all, but I do think that some people may not like the way that it was structured because of the way that the story ends up being told. So anyway, it's in two parts. And the first part is told from the perspective of Rosie. Rosie is a teenager at the beginning of our story, and she has synesthesia. And in her case, that means she can, when she hears sounds, she sees colors in her mind and shapes associated with those sounds. Some people at that time, where the story begins in the late 30s, that was considered a defect or a flaw. And she is left all alone without her family when they die in a horrible accident. And a series of events happens and very tragic things happen to her. And that part of the story is really hard to read. In the end, she suffers because of this condition and because of the way some people view it. And then the second section of the book, the second part, is told from the view of a woman named Helen Calvert, who is connected to Rosie in a way I don't want to say because it will give spoilers, but she is an adult at the time that Rosie's story begins. And she is off page at that point, but then we get to see her perspective and her story in the second half. And her paths and Rosie's paths intertwine in very meaningful ways throughout the story and eventually become beautifully connected at the end. The primary point of this whole story and this book is to highlight the role that eugenics played in cultural ideology in the United States. And Susan Meissner was just shining a light on the fact that it was present not just in Hitler and in Europe in World War II, but also in the United States. And the same sort of things that Hitler was doing were happening here. And people were being sterilized due to supposed defects or flaws. So that's what the whole story is about. And it comes up in a variety of ways throughout the story, and it's explored in a variety of ways. I like that Susan Meissner managed to look at it closely and examine it closely without falling into the trap of being preachy about it, because I know I've talked about this a lot. To me, that really can detract from the ability of a story to make its point when it's hammered home too much. And when all of the narration and all of the dialogue centers on it and is very emphatically one-sided, I feel like Susan Meissner does a fantastic job of shining a light on this issue and examining it without getting preachy. And or political or manipulative even. I think it's really well done. I really enjoyed the way she told the story. And I already talked in my previous weekly reading vlog about how much I really enjoyed her characterization in this story and how the characters were so complex. They were neither all good nor evil. They were just very complex. And the things that they did were evil were very clearly evil. But you also saw them as human beings. Some of them deserved a decent amount of contempt, for sure. For sure. But you also could see some aspects of their life and of the things that led them to where they were that gives you some amount of sympathy for them and not just pure critical judgment of you're a horrible person kind of thing. So I appreciated that nuance of examining the characters. That was one of the strengths, I think, of this book, in my opinion. So anyway, overall, I really enjoyed it. One thing about there being two distinct parts to the story, one being one perspective and one being a different perspective, is neither one of the perspectives tells the whole story from beginning to end. So you get the first half of the story from Rosie's perspective, and then we pick up in that same, where Rosie's narrative leaves off, Helen's narrative begins, and then we get to the end of the story. So you don't have Helen's perspective of the first however many years, and you don't get Rosie's perspective of the last however many years. So I think some people may feel like they're missing out on parts of the story. And I think the reason Susan Meissner did it was because those parts weren't really the story that she was trying to tell. She was honing in on specific things that she wanted to highlight, and she was weaving her narrative together in such a way to tell the specific story she was trying to tell. So she leaves out all the unnecessary details that don't directly impact what she was highlighting, if that makes sense. So it didn't bother me, but I can see some people might dislike that. Finally, I just want to mention just a couple content warnings. There is some mouth cussing, so just be aware of that if that is a concern for you. And also, there is a scene that is not graphically described. It is essential for the plot of the story, but it is a scene of physical intimacy. And I personally felt like it was handled very well and it didn't bother me at all, but just so you know, that is in there as well. So, and it deals with some heavy topics, just be aware of that. So anyway, I found it a very engrossing and compelling read. In the end, I think I gave it 4.5 stars, which is pretty good for me. And I really enjoyed it. And this particular copy I bought in Greenville, and the author had signed it. So I'm going to be happy to keep this one on my shelf. Not sure that I will ever reread it, but it's one that I definitely would recommend and let someone borrow and offer them to read it. So I'm going to keep it and hang on to it. And also, it's a lovely, beautiful cover. So that was for Chantel's Read Your Shelf Challenge, the January prompt for beauty. So I'm crossing off actually all 3 of my primary challenges. I've crossed off my list. So it is January 19th and the rest of the month I can mood read my way through whatever else I want to read, largely most of which are epistolary novels that I want to get to. I just have to decide which ones I want to go to next. And who knows? I have no idea what I'm going to pick up next. We'll see. I have a day off tomorrow and I do have some cleaning that needs to be done. But other than that, we'll see what I pick up and what I get read. See you next time. Bye. Hello. It's Tuesday evening, and this is the 3rd time I'm trying to record this little clip, so I hope it works this time. Anyway, sadly I had to work today, but it was a 2-hour delay, and I have a 2-hour delay again tomorrow. For my 2 hours, I actually kind of just slept in a little bit, and then for the other extra hour that I was gifted, I did a little bit of reading in The Berlin Letters by Katherine Reay. I picked this for the airmail prompt for Epistolary January. And what's funny is the prologue opened up in Germany, which is what I was expecting. I was expecting the story to take place in Germany. But then immediately in chapter 1, we are in Arlington, Virginia, which is like on the other side of Northern Virginia from where I am. And depending on traffic, 45-ish minutes from me. I don't know. Anyway, it's not that super far away from me. So it's hardly like across the ocean from me, hardly airmail distance from me. But I do believe that our main character is going to go to Berlin, and definitely the story centers around things that happened in Berlin in the early 60s. So, and this is the first Katherine Reay book I've read in a while. I've read a lot of her works, but I haven't read, there are a couple of recent books that she has I haven't read. I read, was it the London House she wrote that I didn't really love? I think that was by her. Was that by her or Jocelyn Green? I think that was by her. And I didn't love that one. So anyway, I was not sure how I would feel about this one, but I'm actually so far really enjoying it. The other thing that I am reading is Sound Worship. I mentioned in my last weekly reading vlog that I want to be always having a Christian nonfiction book in progress this year, because I have a whole shelf with 30 plus books and I just need to whittle it down and just read some of them. And it's kind of a shame because I keep seeing Christian nonfiction books like that I want to get or that I want to acquire. And I'm like, no, I can't do that until I read down some of the ones on this shelf. So that's got to be a huge priority for me. So this is the first one I picked up because it's short. And it doesn't take up much space on the shelf, so it's not going to really contribute too much towards that goal. But anyways, I picked it up because I knew I could read it pretty quickly, although I'm not even halfway through yet. And it's interesting. It's just basically about crafting a Christian worldview in regards to music and music choices. And that is definitely a hot button topic with about as many perspectives as there are people. But so far, he hasn't said anything that I would disagree with. And it's an easy read, so I'm looking forward to reading more of that. So hopefully I will have more opportunity tomorrow morning to read a little bit since we have another delay. And also hopefully tonight I'll get a little bit of reading done in that one. So I should finish that one up this week for sure, by which I mean the Berlin letters. Sorry, I switched gears. The Berlin letters, both of them actually. I should finish them up this week. So anyway, I will see you in the next clip. Bye. Well, hello. It is Friday afternoon, and this week has not gone as planned at all. First of all, my son got sick, and I know that the flu was going on around at school, and so I opted to keep him home because I didn't want him spreading those germs everywhere. So he was feeling pretty sick on Wednesday and not all that great yesterday. He seems to be doing pretty well today. He seems fine. So I stayed home with him on Wednesday and Thursday, and yesterday I wasn't feeling great myself, so week did not turn out as planned. However, we have been distinctly lacking in productivity, which is unusual for me. Normally I thrive on being a pretty productive person. Like, I like to be active and doing stuff and getting things done, crossed off my list, but this whole month of January I've really struggled with that, even though I've had a lot of time at home, which has been a gift, a wonderful gift. I've not been super productive. So I guess that means on the flip side, I've gotten plenty of rest. So that's good, I guess. Anyway, I have been fulfilling all of my obligations as far as things that other people pay me to do and things that have deadlines. But when it comes to stuff like housework and household management, and even my reading and stuff, completely lacking in productivity here. Completely lacking. So, even though I was home the past 2 days, first of all, I was doing a lot of working from home. Secondly, yesterday I didn't do as much because I just wasn't feeling up to stuff. So I did not get as much reading done, but I finally, this morning, finished reading The Berlin Letters by Katherine Reay. And I really enjoyed it. The upshot is I would probably give it 4 stars. I was getting a lot of vibes only because of the subject matter, not necessarily because of the style or the approach or anything, but because of the subject matter. I was getting a lot of vibes of Ruta Sepetys's I Must Betray You. And they're very different books, but they're dealing with a similar subject matter, one set in Romania and then this one set in East Berlin. So that was very interesting, dealing with a very interesting time in history when so much was changing so rapidly. This book kind of takes you through the entire life of the Berlin Wall. In fact, I would say that the Berlin Wall is kind of a character in this story. It plays a very important role in everything that happens in the story, and it provides the timeline for the story. The story begins with the opening of the Berlin Wall, and it ends with the wall coming down. So that's a really interesting perspective from which the story was told. And it's also told from both sides of the ocean. So our main character here, Louisa, she lives in Arlington, Virginia, but her whole family is from Germany, and her father is in Germany. The story is told from both of their perspectives. We go back and forth between the perspectives, and we also get the letters that are exchanged from her father to her grandfather. She's actually living with her grandparents in Arlington. It's a really interesting perspective and way of looking at this time in history. I have noticed that I feel like the Cold War is becoming the new World War II in terms of historical fiction, and I'm here for it because I lived through the tail end of it, but I was a child and I just heard people talking about it. I heard my parents telling their experiences with it and the things in their childhood, you know, that happened, the fears that they had and stuff like that. But other than that, I have a very little, it's history to me. So it's so intriguing to read about it. And the 80s, when I was alive, so much of that was shifting and changing. And I remember that. I remember people talking about it a lot, but I was not of an age at that point to really pursue information myself. So only what I heard and what I was exposed to in terms of information is what trickled into my brain and what I retained from that, which was not a lot, mostly just kind of impressions. So what I think is most interesting whenever I read about this time period in history, like the late 80s and all of the revolution that was happening in, or counter-revolution, whatever you want to call it, that was happening in Eastern Europe at the time. In the year 2000, it's a long story, but to make a long story short, we were traveling through Europe. And we went through Berlin as part of it. And we went to the spot in Germany where, you know, what remains of the wall and Checkpoint Charlie. And, or at least at that time, I'm not even sure what they had there at this point. There was also a museum that we went through that I remember aspects of it and being very intrigued by that museum. But at the time, and I was talking about this with my sister, who is 9 years older than me, and we were talking about the difference a decade can make. Because in 2000, we were just a little over a decade, 11 years past the wall coming down. We were within a decade of the reunification of Germany. This was not ancient history. This was not even old history. This was fresh. And I don't think I realized in the minds of the Germans and the people who lived there how fresh it was to them. I had no idea. To me, it was something that happened when I was a kid. And by this point in time, I was a full-grown adult and everything was like past. So I didn't really understand the magnitude of what I was seeing and how recent its impact had been. I had no idea. But I was talking with my sister, and she said at that time she was fully aware of all of that. But again, she was essentially an adult at the time that the wall came down and all of this stuff was happening in Europe. And she also had lived through more of the Cold War era than I had. So she had a more solid understanding of what all of that meant. And so to her, it was much more meaningful when all of this took place and she was experiencing it as an adult. And it just occurred to me in the course of the conversation, one or the other of us was like, what a difference one decade can make in history, but also in a person's perspective of what you lived through and what you experienced. So anyway, this book, just for that alone, like it dredged up a lot of memory for me. It dredged up a lot of conversation. It dredged up a lot of research because I was looking up like facts that I wasn't fully aware of about the Berlin Wall and stuff. Because again, like there's a gap here because it happened when I was young and in school. And so I didn't learn about it in school. Sure, I lived through it, but I was little, so I didn't really grasp what was happening. So like I mentioned last year when I read I Must Betray You, same thing. Like I lived through it. I heard about it vaguely. I understood that it was happening, but I didn't know any of the facts surrounding it. So I was like looking up information about the whole Berlin Wall and the differences between the government structure in East Berlin and West Berlin, and how West Berlin shifted and evolved over time. And anyway, all of that stuff. It was so interesting. So back to the book. It is a very interesting book. I definitely recommend it. It is, I would say, one of Katherine Reay's, if I were like to rank her books, I would put it near the top. But it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples because it's very different subject matter from a lot of the other books that she's written. So it's a little bit different. There's some aspect of like spying in it and adventure and escape and all that stuff, but that's not really what it is. It's not a suspense book. It's not a spy story. It's not an adventure in that way. It's still very introspective, like all of Katherine Reay's books are, with our main character, but also with her family. And it's very much about the relationships and their personal development and the way they responded to and reacted to the things that they were experiencing in their different generations. And because there are 3 different generations represented in this story. So anyway, it's just a really well-written look at all of that. There are some minor flaws and things in the story that struck me as I was going through, maybe some inconsistencies. It's in first person, present tense, but there's a lot of looking back. So then that's past tense. So I was getting a little bit hung up by that. And that's one of the things I don't like about present tense. I don't think it works great in every format and type of story. And I think this is one, maybe it's not perfect for that. So that's just a minor quibble. And anything else would just be, again, a minor quibble, little things. Overall, I really enjoyed the story and this look at this particular time in history. And another thing of interest was I just read Only the Beautiful, which ended in the 50s. And it wasn't about Germany, but it did go into Austria. There were some things that happened in Austria, as well as Switzerland. So very nearby, very close nearby. And then this picks up in the early 60s in Berlin. So it was like, I'm just like going through history here in these 2 books. So anyway, it was very interesting. And I do recommend this if you like historical fiction, particularly if you are interested in reading more set in the Cold War era. I don't have it with me right here, but I'm still reading through the Sound Worship book. And other than that, I'm trying to decide what to pick up next. And I literally have no idea. I think I might have to do like a randomizer thing. So I think actually, let's do that right now. Okay, once again, this is like the 3rd time I'm trying to record this clip. It should not take this long. But anyway, here are the books that I have under consideration for one reason or another. The Historian, a novel by Elizabeth Kostova, and this one was on my January TBR. It's a chunker though. Not sure if I can finish it in January, but I am very interested in it. Then I picked this one up at a thrift store or something somewhere recently, and I am very interested in it. It's not my typical fare. It's outside my comfort zone, but quite a few of the booktubers I followed have really enjoyed it, and I'm willing to give it a try and to see how I like it. It sounds intriguing to me. So who knows? But I am interested and I want to try it. Then I have Jane and Dorothy, A True Tale of Sense and Sensibility, The Lives of Jane Austen and Dorothy Wordsworth. Now, I'm not 100% sure why the author, Marian Veevers, chose to compare and contrast these 2 women's lives in particular, but I think it probably has something to do with that tale of sense and sensibility. And it seems interesting and fits in well with the 250th anniversary celebration of Jane Austen, particularly considering we're going to be reading Sense and Sensibility next month. So it's a thought. And then The Appeal by Janice Hallett. I've heard mixed things about this one. I am very curious about it. It fits the email prompt for Epistolary January. So then we have The Secret Diaries of Charlotte Bronte. I know many of you read The Lost Memoirs of Jane Austen by Syrie James in January for Jane Austen's 250th birthday celebration. I did not because I'd already read that one, but I put this one on my TBR, and it also fits for Epistolary January. And then this fits for Epistolary January and for the Jane Austen celebration. Dear Jane Austen, A Heroine's Guide to Life and Love by Patrice Hannon. And this one is basically people writing letters to Jane Austen and, her giving advice. And then Ladies of the House is a modern retelling of Sense and Sensibility by Lauren Edmondson. And I'm curious about this. I know nothing about it, and I know nothing about this author. So if you know anything, let me know. I would prefer to read this after actually reading Sense and Sensibility, which is up next in February for our Jane Austen birthday celebration. But I don't know how long I can keep it out of the library, because I checked this out a couple weeks ago, and depending on if other people are wanting to get it, I can only keep it out for so long. So I don't know if I'll still be able to have it then. So I might as well read it first if it gets picked on the randomizer. I had so much trouble filming this part. And so in the end, I'm just going to show you a screen capture video of the wheel spinning. And so we can see what my first choice is to read this month. I ended up picking two. So the first one is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, which is quite a departure for me. I don't normally read this genre or type of story, but I've heard a lot of people talking about it, picked it up at thrift store and thought I would give it a try. It does intrigue me. The concept intrigues me. I'm sure everybody knows already, but Divine Rivals is an epic enemies to lovers fantasy novel filled with hope and heartbreak and the unparalleled power of love. So we'll see how that goes. All right, and then I spun it again just to have two options to work with. And so Jane and Dorothy. So I'm very interested to read more about Jane Austen. I was a little bit disappointed in the biography that I read about her last year. So I'm hoping that this will be an interesting perspective. And also I will learn something about Dorothy Wordsworth in the meantime, because I know nothing about her really. So, except that she was the sister of, what's his name, Wordsworth? Why can't I William. Okay, this is funny. Somebody's dentist appointment card was used as a bookmark. They didn't get very far in the book. If that's as far as they read, that does not bode well for me, but anyway, so those are the two books I will be picking up next, and I will see you next time. Bye. And now it is Saturday, and I'm going to close out this video. Since the last clip, when I randomly chose the books that I was going to read next, I have not had a great deal of time to read. That was Friday afternoon. Shortly after that, I had to take my boys to their basketball games, which, by the way, were nail biters. Oh my goodness. The teams were so perfectly matched in skill, and it was up until the last minute, like, not a given thing for either team. So my younger son won his game by like 6 points, I think. And then my older son, they lost their game in overtime by 2 points. It was so close, and my heart was beating so fast. Oh my goodness, it was crazy. But like their coach told the team before overtime started, when they were tied, he said, you know what? I don't even care what happens in overtime. Win or lose, I'm proud of you guys because you've played the best you've played all season. And that's true. I don't know a great deal about basketball, but I could see the improvement. I could see that they were doing the plays that the coach was trying to teach them, and they were being more successful than usual. And they were playing competitively. And also they have a tendency to stop playing with their mind and start playing emotionally. And then they get a little bit, things go south quickly when that happens. But they were playing smart yesterday, and they did a great job. So anyway, nail-biting games. But by the time all that was said and done, we had dinner and we came home, and I was editing and stuff. I read a little bit after that, but I didn't read a lot. And this morning I am about to head out to a piano recital. So I have some students who are performing in a piano recital today. And I have these little bang wings happening, which is really annoying. Anyways, so hence I have my little piano earrings that my students gave me, and little, I don't know if you can see, well, I don't know if you can see the little treble clef and the 16th notes there. So I'm all dressed up like a good piano teacher should be, and going to that recital today.
After that though, my schedule is mostly free. I do think I need to run to the library today, and I do need to do housework as usual. It's like a never ending thing, right? You know, always got some of it. Laundry, cleaning the bathroom, sweeping the stairs, that kind of stuff. So anyway, but I did start one of the books that I chose yesterday, and I was like reading it in timeouts and halftime at the basketball games, because that's what I do. But I'm a very good basketball mom, and I watch the actual game, no matter how much of a nail biter it is and how much it is tearing me apart emotionally. I watch it. I watch every second. I just read in between. Anyways, I was reading Divine Rivals. I was actually surprised by how much I'm enjoying the writing of it. I have no idea at this point exactly, well, I mean, I have some ideas of where the story is going to go. I don't know exactly what all it's going to entail, and it's definitely a fantasy world, and there's like magical elements and gods and goddesses and stuff, which are not really my thing, but I am really enjoying the writing. The writing is really beautiful. Let's see if I can find a quick example. Here's a short paragraph where the descriptions of the setting are just perfect, and they put you right there. I love her use of involving all of the senses. Like our main character, Iris, not only does she see and hear things when she's describing the setting, but also she smells things and tastes things. And the way it's described is not hokey at all. It's just immersive and atmospheric. So here's one paragraph. Back in the quiet of her chamber, Iris opened the window and listened to the rain. The air was cold, brisk. A trace of winter lingered within it, but Iris welcomed its bite and how it made her skin pebble. It reminded her that she was alive. And those are just sensations. Even though this is an unrealistic setting and world and place, we can feel that because we've experienced that, right? And she just describes it so beautifully and so perfectly. And the opening prologue, when she's saying goodbye to her brother, is just, it really drew me in. It really set the tone for the whole book. So I'm enjoying that. I'm also, okay guys, I see Jane Austen everywhere. I acknowledge this, so there's a definite bias. But I'm catching Lizzie Darcy vibes here between the two characters, Iris and Roman. Although I always want to say Roman, which is the Spanish pronunciation. So I don't know, is he Roman or Roman? I'm guessing Roman. But anyways, I'm definitely catching some Lizzie Darcy vibes. I'm also getting You've Got Mail vibes. So it's very interesting. I'm intrigued. I'm looking forward to reading more. I haven't started Jane and Dorothy yet, but I will when I have a minute. That's what I've got going on today. This is the end of my week and wrapping up my weekly reading vlog. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave your thoughts in the comments about any of the books I've read or my thoughts on the Cold War. I'm really curious to hear you guys from your perspective, whatever your age is, whether you lived through the Cold War as an adult or as a child, if you experienced the breaking up of the Soviet Union and the Eastern communist countries in the late 80s and early 90s. And anyway, if you are too young to remember any of that, I'm also curious to hear your thoughts about looking back on it as history. And let's keep the conversation going in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye. Said that last clip was my final clip for the week, but then after my piano recital, I did a little gallivanting, and so I wanted to share a couple things with you. First of all, my very favorite coffee shop in Northern Virginia was 2 miles past where I did my piano recital, and I had time today, so I went there because otherwise I never get there. So that was so much fun, and I got their classic drink, they call it their signature drink, and it was delicious, of course, but also they had some tea on clearance, And so I got this. It sounds so good. Pink grapefruit black tea. And the ingredients are grapefruit, orange, papaya, safflower, cornflower, red plum, and organic flavors. So that sounds delicious. I love grapefruit. It's one of my favorite fruits. And it just sounds so refreshing. I feel like it would make some really good iced tea. Not very wintry, but you know. And then I had to drop some books off at the library. Oh, and you know what I mentioned in my video about acquiring free and cheap books? And I mentioned having reciprocal libraries. One of the problems is you have to keep track of which library you got your books from, especially if you're dealing with physical books. So I went and and it was a little embarrassing because this little boy was watching me because he wanted to see how the little machine worked for turning in your books. And so I put one book in and then it spit it right back out at me. And it was like, we do not recognize this book. And I was like, what? Yeah, it came from a totally other county. And I was like, oops, sorry about that. Anyway, I did a little browsing in the library and I don't know if I will read it before I have to return it, but I do want to read it, so I picked it up. And that is Night Falls on Predicament Avenue by Jamie Jo Wright. I am really behind on her books and I really want to catch up. That means I need to read several of them this year. So I do want to read it. We'll see. I mean, it kind of falls, it's not a classic, but it falls in with the Gothic idea for February, but it's not a classic, so it's not going to be my main read for February. And then I failed. It is January 25th. Yeah. So I made it 24 days into the book buying ban. That's pretty good, right? It's good. It's very, very good. I made it 3/4 of the month. I'm quite proud of myself. But also I totally failed because I was at the library today. And the thing is, I glance through the books for sale at this particular library, the closest library to me, every time I'm there, and they never have anything that I actually want to buy. Almost never. It's pretty rare. Like, doesn't happen. Of course. Today. Of course. First of all, the first thing I saw was this. The Masterpiece by Francine Rivers. Now, it is a library copy. Now, looks like a private library because I might be able to take that off without ruining it. And it has this black marked off there. And it has a little note in there. So it's not in perfect, pristine condition, but it's pretty close. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with it. And beautiful hardcover copy of this book for $2. And I had cash in my purse. So I do have an almost complete collection of Francine Rivers books, but I don't have this one, and I did enjoy reading it when it came out a couple years ago. So yeah, and I wasn't sure how long it would be there at the library. I didn't want to wait until next weekend to try to pick it up, so I got it. And then I just kept browsing. Now this one I consoled myself with the thought that, well, at least I've already read this one. So I'm not adding physical books to my shelf that I need to read. I've already read it. So it's just one that I've read that I liked and an author that I like. So I wanted to keep it. So I consoled myself with that thought. Then in the paperback section, there were not one, not two, but 3 Georgette Hair books. I almost never see Georgette Hair books in the wild. I mean, I do, but a lot of times they're like in really poor condition, vintage, mass market paperback copies. And so that's what I have. And these, I think I may have read one of them, but not the other 2. These are in much better condition than I am normally able to find Georgette Hair, and they were only $1 each. I just couldn't leave them there, guys. Couldn't. And so Georgette Hair is another one that needs to move up my list of reading through their catalog because I really do enjoy her as an author. So I got this one, False Colors by Georgette Hair. And then I got Friday's Child. This is the one I think I've read. That title is really familiar to me. I'm pretty sure. But it has been a long time. And then this one I've heard of, but I have not read it. The Unknown Ajax. So I am looking forward to, I just need to like sit down and just read all my Georgette hair, because now I have like 6, I think, by her that I don't remember reading. I may have, but I don't remember anything about them. So yeah, that was a fail, but also not a fail, because I don't regret it. I don't regret that $5, not even one little bit. I don't even regret the space on my shelves. So it was $5 well spent, and it will be space well used on my shelf. I'd even happily get rid of other books to make room for these if it came to that. So there we go. I made it 3/4 of the way. How have you done, by the way, with the January Book Buying Ban Challenge? Have you been more successful than me? Let me know in the comments. And for real, this time, goodbye.